The next big step is really to have the security teams really work at the paved road level, like provide those secure by default controls at every level of building services security.
Hi, you're listening to The Secure Developer. It's part of the My DevSecOps community, a platform for developers, operators, and security people to share their views and practices on DevSecOps, Dev and Sec collaboration, cloud security, and more. Check out mydevsecops.io to join the community and find other great resources. This podcast is sponsored by Snyk. Snyk is a dev-first security company helping companies fix vulnerabilities in open source components and containers without slowing down development. To learn more, visit snyk.io. On today's episode, Guy Podjarny, president and co-founder of Snyk, talks to Julien Vehent at DevSecCon Seattle. Julien was the keynote speaker where he explored the idea of using modern techniques, culture shift, and DevOps principles to grow security-first culture in an organization. He is a security engineer and manager focusing on web and the author of Securing DevOps. He is currently responsible for the operational security of Firefox's backend infrastructure at Mozilla.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today we have a special edition of the Secure Developer Podcast, the sort of DevSecCon edition. And with us, we have one of the keynote speakers here at DevSecCon, Julien Vehent. Welcome to the show, Julien.
Thanks for having me.
So, Julien, before we dig into sort of the talk and details, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do? Sure.
I'm a security engineer at heart. I run the Firefox Operations Security team at Mozilla, and our job is to protect the Firefox backend infrastructure, so all of the services that you don't see when you use a browser, some of them that you see, and all of the build infrastructure that compiles Firefox. And I'm also a DevSecOps advocate and the author of Securing DevOps.
Oh, very cool. It's already some initial homework for our audience to go check out the book. Okay, cool. So you sort of build, security operations and grow them within Mozilla. What is your talk about here at the event?
So my talk is really a mix of a retrospective of how we built the Firefox Operations Security team at Mozilla, where we came from, and where I'd like to see it go. And the talk is initially I wanted to code it, there is no security team, but I thought it might scare people off a little bit. So I said beyond the security team, which is really the goal, where the organization is so mature at improving and adopting security that it pretty much no longer needs to have a dedicated security team. And it's really where the end state is for a lot of us, is making all of the improvements we can to have developers and operator control their own fate, basically, and control their own security. So my talk is a discussion of which techniques we use at Mozilla to grow the maturity of the organization, which one worked, which ones didn't, and where we see it go in the future.
Do you think that's the future? So do you see kind of the end result being a place in which there is no security team? Do you see it as a different type of
No, I don't
role?
think so. I think we'll always need a security team, but I really wish it were so. I think the future shape of the security may be quite different. We've already de-invested heavily in infrastructure security because we mostly use the cloud now, and we outsource essentially the cost of infrastructure security to cloud operators. The traditional shape of a security team has really changed over the last 5 or 6 years, where we're starting to see more and more teams adopt a software engineering culture, developing tools and integrating their tooling and their controls inside of the CI/CD pipelines, etc. I think what's going to happen over the next few years, that this trend is going to continue, that teams are going to be less involved into the day-to-day because we have this notion of paved roads, because we have these services that are secure by default, that are going out, that don't need to be really managed by security engineers constantly. And instead, security teams will move toward being more of a strategic team that builds tools that can be used globally in the organization, or set the long-term strategy, security strategy of the organization, collect metrics, discuss threat models and risks. And that's really where I think we will end up being a team of expert consultants, and not down in the trenches anymore.
Kind of operators. Is it sort of a fair analogy to compare it to like the system reliability engineers, or some of those the modern roles of ops experts in kind of the era of DevOps, if you will?
Perhaps, yes. I think what we'll see is really this idea that we're using more and more standardized tools that are secure by default, right? The security team is kind of writing the security standard and improving the security standard and not necessarily worrying about how that standard gets implemented day to day, right? If you look at very mature organizations, they essentially have one way of deploying things, one way of writing applications, and that one way is secure by default, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the security team focuses on that one paved road and improves that one path. And so it frees up a tremendous amount of time for security people to go work on other things so that they don't have to worry about checking every single deployment or checking every single instance of a service.
And within so you create that paved road, which I sort of assume indeed it's secure by default. It might have, some relevant tests and tools in the pipeline, whether it's in the practice you do at Mozilla or just in general recommendation, do you think it's a paved road, but a developer should be allowed to kind of walk off to the side, or is it more, two walls to the side of that paved road?
No, I think we need to embrace chaos, and we need to allow people to do crazy things. I mean, that's part of allowing for success that no one else can really foresee in advance, right? You may have a developer who has a crazy idea in a corner of the organization, and allowing that developer to try out that idea may prove to be immensely successful. It may fail as well, but you need to leave some room for that. The paved road is really about, if you have a standard service, if you're not doing anything interesting, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time rebuilding everything, then just do it on the paved road. It's easy, right? If you're spinning up a new API that just solves a business case and you want to do that in a couple of days, the paved road is great for you. If you want to try something new, then you should have the support from the security team and the rest of the organization to help you cover the risks that people may not know about yet, right? But freeing up that time on the paved road gives security teams the time to go look at these new projects, to embrace the chaos and go help the snowflakes kind of do things and avoid the risks. The way we do this at Mozilla, we have a lot of innovators. I like to think of Mozilla as more of an incubator of startups and not just a corporation. And all of these small groups that like to innovate will come up with new frameworks, new infrastructure, new models we've never seen before. And so we give them checklists of a very specific type of risks and threat that we want them to think about and cover when they engineer their applications. And then it's kind of up to them to figure out how they implement that and how they take security into account. We help them, of course, but we give them that set of requirements. And most developers actually really, really like having those clear expectations written down for them to work through and think about. They feel like they own the aspect of security and they don't just offload it over to the security team.
Yeah, no, I fully relate to that. And I think the idea would be make it easy to be secure, sort of choose that path. But then you give someone the freedom to a developer, an empowered developer, to veer off the path and to choose their own aspects, but they need to be intentional about it. And in that case, those are the cases where you need to equip such developers with the ability to ask the right questions and to maybe piece and parcel the different elements. Where do you think we are on this journey? I don't know if it's as an industry, as Mozilla, how far down that path do you think we are?
Well, not everyone moves at the same speed. Even within a single organization, you always have groups that adopt new things faster than other groups that are slower to move. I think we are already very much in a situation where the security team, in most DevOps organizations, the security team is no longer involved with like the low-level infrastructure security operations, right? They really let the operators take care of that, and they build the tools to assess. So we kind of moved away from that down in the trenches really model that we had a few years ago. Most security teams are adopting this tool building, software engineering approach. So we're probably halfway through in that sense. The next big step is really to have the security teams really work at the paved road level, provide those secure by default controls at every level of building security service, of building services security. So there's still a whole lot of work to do. And another thing that I think as a security industry we need to make progress on is in improving our security strategy. In a lot of cases, we're down at the tactical level. We look very specifically at, a specific control, a specific version of TLS that needs to be adopted, a dependency that needs to be updated, etc. To be honest, like those problems are kind of boring. Like, update your systems, have the tools that, I'm not going to say that to you, have the tools to tell you, that a system is running on insecure updates, and then just do the thing. You don't need a security team to be involved with that. Maybe the security team builds the tooling, but it doesn't need to tell developers things that they should just know, and they already know in most cases. And so we're still thinking in those tactical terms when in fact we should just let the organization take care of those things and move up. Think about what it is, what it means to run a secure service tomorrow, right? Does that mean that we need to think about data retention and data security? We're still leaking data all over the internet. Every time someone uses a service, they end up trusting some S3 buckets that may be publicly accessible, etc. We need to provide better guarantees that are mostly at an end user and business level, and stop worrying about the day-to-day as much.
Got it. And how, maybe kind of one last question is, what does this do to the skill set within the security teams? Like, do you think security teams as they stand today, the people employed with sort of the experience and skills that they have there are also the right people to sort of level that up? Should we expect some shakeup in the makeup of the people and the skills and the talents within the security orgs?
I think it already happened in not everywhere, obviously. You still see a lot of traditional organizations that employ traditional security people, the CISSP, the network security engineer who manages firewalls. But in a lot of more webby DevOps organizations, we already see security teams being composed of software engineers, mostly, of people who have an architecture background, who are more concerned about how we build services globally than they are about the state of firewall rules or the shape of a VLAN, right? So the next challenge for the security industry is how to level up its own people to make sure that everyone understands software engineering, services engineering, and can help organizations adopt, secure controls at the software engineering level. We're moving up the stack, basically.
Yep.
We're moving up the stack. The security industry is already a lot more of an AppSec industry than it was 10 years ago, right? And it's going to continue going up because frameworks abstract more and more of the AppSec level.
Yep.
And so that's why I think to be successful in the next 20 years, a security engineer should know how to program, how to implement services, but also have a keen understanding of risks, threat models, and how to talk to business.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. And I think it happened in some places, and there's a lot of places that it hasn't. But I agree with you on that trend, and I guess overall a positive. So before we kind of let you go, any other sort of key highlights you want to, or plugs for the talk? We're going to post the YouTube video as well and a link to it. Any other sort of key sound bites to lure people into watching?
Well, there are hopefully quite a few interesting stories. I guess the one thing that I mentioned, and maybe that make people want to watch the keynote, is that I used to run a site affiliated with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And I used to crash that site almost every day. So that was the fun side of running ops before we had DevOps. So what I'm going to share tomorrow is some of the lessons learned from doing shitty ops and how to prevent that.
Excellent. That's a great plug as well. Julien, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And I hope you join us for the next one, that you've enjoyed this DevSecCon edition of the Secure Developer Podcast.
Thanks for listening to The Secure Developer. That's all we have time for today. For additional episodes and full transcriptions, visit mydevsecops.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or get involved in the community, you can also find us on Twitter at @mydevsecops. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes if you enjoyed today's episode. Bye for now.